Good morning. Today is Palm Sunday, and the readings are taken from Luke chapter 19, verses 28 to 40, and Philippians 2, 5 to 11. There's a difference as to how people act at sports events when they are watching. At football matches, for instance, people tend to shout their support in all kinds of ways. But at tennis matches, the onlookers are supposed to be quiet so as not to damage the player's concentration. In both kinds of sports, though, the supporters have a role to play to watch their team or sportsperson win the game. In today's readings, this Palm Sunday, there is also a crowd of those who are looking on in Luke's Gospel and who are shouting their hosannas, "Oh, save," willing Jesus to ride into Jerusalem as a victorious general. The event brings up some interesting facts. One is that Jesus already knew the type of animal that would carry him, a young colt that had never carried anyone yet. This in itself is unusual, not only because the account in Matthew's Gospel talks about the colt being the foal of a donkey, who is to be found with its mother, and such a young animal would not willingly leave its mother, and vice versa. Another is that the people in the crowd are recognizing Jesus as king, but the Pharisees don't agree and want Jesus to stop his disciples. It's the controversy and the unusual that set this event off as a marked turning point in the story. Both the crowd and the Pharisees got it wrong as to who Jesus was. The crowd because they thought he would be a military figure who would free the people in the political sense, and the Pharisees because they didn't recognize Jesus as the Messiah. Then we also have the reading from Philippians, an early hymn presumably, that celebrates Jesus' identity. It sets out clearly who Jesus is and that his crown is one to be placed on him through the cross. The victory that was to be won through his obedience would set the people of the world truly free, not just in the political sense, but in the spiritual and emotional life. This part of Paul's letter to the Philippians also states that one day there will not be a single person who won't bow their knees and confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Everybody will have to make way for Jesus. All people will know and have to acknowledge Jesus' identity without exception. So what can we take away from this? The crowds on Palm Sunday may have got Jesus mixed up with their own ideas of what freedom might look like. They may not be able to understand the true meaning of freedom. The Pharisees, who were learned and who had read the scriptures, were still blinded by what they thought the Messiah should look like. In a way, they were not very different from our own generation, who are seeking for what they call freedom in possessions and fame, rather than service and humility. But even though the people then, and many others now, got it wrong, that doesn't mean that the work of salvation that Jesus performed doesn't have an effect. It had, and it still does, and it will be so. The hymn from Philippians 2 is prophetic, and like so many other prophecies that have come true, this one will too, fully, in the course of time. That means that we are still called to be faithful and diligent, and with patience and humility to speak kindness and hope and love to our neighbor, and also to cheer Jesus on. Remember that we are called to worship, so let's do that, in singing and praying and learning from him, from whom all blessings flow. In the spiritual sense too, in our lives, let us make way for the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, to the glory of God the Father. Amen.